went from being a punk kid wondering why I wasn't making any money playing drums to somebody who's been hired literally hundreds of times to play gigs from huge stadiums to coffee shops, from recording studios to summer festivals. And I even got to open for the Beach Boys. I've also worked on dozens of recordings, from albums of songs to TV shows and documentaries. I've performed on both coasts of the United States and 100 places in between. It has been an absolutely wild ride, and it continues to this day, for which I am very grateful. This is part of a series about how to develop your career as a professional musician, and if you haven't watched my previous videos, I'd recommend giving them a quick look. I'll link them in the description. In this video, we're going to talk about that crucial step of just getting started. How do you get that very first gig? So I'm going to give you the steps that I've followed and things that I've recommended to hundreds of students. And I've got a gig in a couple hours, so we're going to make this fast. One of the most common questions I get asked is, how do I get started playing paying gigs? Everybody wants to get a lot of calls, but you have to get the first call first, and then you have to keep the gig. Before we get too deep into this topic, I just want to say you can do it. I can remember being at a point where I thought getting paid to play drums was just a pipe dream and it would never happen, but it did, and it will for you too. Seriously, you got to just keep believing in yourself and keep working on it. Don't be afraid to adjust and refine your strategy or change your path as you go along. To quote Alex Hormozy, you're either going to keep going until you're successful or you're going to quit before you are. Okay, step one is consistent, regular preparation. To paraphrase another one of my favorite quotes, the most important thing you can ever work on is the best version of you. For me as a drummer, this is going to involve at least 3 things. First, study the greats. I'm sure you already have a collection of favorite drummers, favorite bands, favorite artists, so just start there. Straight up steal the best things they do, from grooves to fills, even solos, and learn as many songs as possible. At the same time, start to expand your comfort zone. If you've only ever played jazz, start checking out some rock or country music. If you've only ever played rock or pop music, start listening to jazz. It will help you to learn some basic grooves like a swing beat, shuffle, bossa nova, and samba, and definitely some classic funk grooves. And again, learn as many songs as you can in as many styles as you can. You will never regret this study. And along with more styles and grooves, expand your list of drummers that you listen to. There are literally thousands of great players out there. Some of my favorites are players like Buddy Rich, Carter Beauford, Annika Nilles, Tony Williams, Emmanuel Caplet, and more recently, players like Isaac Jamba or Jarris Yokley. If you don't know where to start, check out the artist pages on some of your favorite equipment, your favorite drum company or cymbal company. Again, there are so many great players out there. Just choose a few and get started. You're not going to go wrong. And I think it goes without saying that along the way, you need to invest the time to continually improve your technique. If you can, consider taking lessons from the best drummer in your area and check out the online education platforms. There's a lot of great ones to look at. So again, step 1, put in the time to study, listen, and practice. This will be the most valuable investment of time you can make in your drumming career. Okay, the next thing on my list, the second thing you want to work on is getting your sound together. This is definitely going to include learning how to tune better, but it can also include improving your technique so that you're actually getting a better sound out of the drums and the cymbals. For a lot of us, this is also going to include upgrading your gear. Maybe you are playing cheaper or not as good sounding gear, and so as you can, get that better snare drum. Improve the heads, get a different ride cymbal. Just upgrade your sound as you go along. Along the way, as you're listening to great music and great drummers, you're going to hear sounds you like. You're going to hear a kick sound, snare sound, cymbals, and toms. And that's awesome. And eventually, these are going to combine in your head to how you want to sound. So again, keep working on your kit. Make it sound the way you hear it in your head. One thing I would say though is to definitely listen to your kit from different angles. It's going to sound one way when you're sitting on the throne and you're actually playing. It's going to sound a different way out front of the kit or under microphones. So you definitely want to experience your drum sounds from more angles than just the driver's seat. So if you have a drummer friend or maybe a younger brother or sister, have them sit on your kit and bang around a little bit while you walk around the room or down the hall or upstairs, whatever it is. One caveat I'll give you is that drum sounds are maybe the most processed sounds when you're listening to recordings, especially more modern recordings. So they can be pretty deceiving. What you're going to hear as you're playing the drums is not what you're going to hear once those sounds have been recorded, mixed and mastered, and then pushed back out through your speakers or your headphones. So as you listen a lot and experiment a lot and record yourself, even if it's just on your phone, you're going to start to hear how those live drum sounds are going to translate through a microphone or through the mixing process. So the third thing that I would say is to be okay allowing your own voice to develop. There is a lot to be said about emulating great drummers. I mean, if you can play, say, Superstition and sound exactly like the recording, that's going to be good. That's going to take you a lot of places. At the same time, though, start developing your own style. Just like developing the sound of your drum kit, the way that you play is going to develop based on who you're listening to and the gigs that you play and the practice and study that you do. No matter how much you try to sound like another player, because of your experience, because of the things that you take in, you're eventually going to sound like you no matter what. And that is a good thing. There are definitely some musicians out there who try really hard not to be exposed to any outside influences. I've run into these people throughout my career. They don't want to learn to read music. They don't want to transcribe or learn anybody else's songs because they don't want to be influenced by them. They'll say things like, I just want to sound like me. I don't want to have anybody else's influences on my music. Candidly, I can kind of see where they're coming from on that. But to me, it doesn't make a ton of sense. It's almost like trying to write a great novel without really having a grasp of how the language works. From my perspective, studying Shakespeare is not going to keep you from becoming J.K. Rowling. If anything, it's going to make you much better than you would have been without it. Okay, next step. You've been working really hard on developing yourself as a player. You're ready to play some gigs. The best way to get that first gig is through real, live, human interaction. So here's where I'd start. First, if you are in school of any kind, middle school, high school, college, even if you're returning to school as an adult later on, hang out where musicians hang out. I strongly recommend that you get involved in the school music scene by joining band or choir or orchestra or even take a guitar class. Really, any sort of music class that's being offered, if you can get into that, you're going to meet other people who are playing music and learning music. And even if you don't take a music class, go to concerts, talent shows, open mic nights, really anywhere music is being played. Participate where you can, and if you run into somebody or you see somebody who's doing something that you think is cool or interesting, strike up a conversation. Likewise, a lot of churches have live bands playing as part of their worship services, so that might be an option for you as well. A church can be a great place to run into extremely talented and very dedicated people. And a lot of churches actually have paid music positions, so you could join a church band and that is a paying gig. And then in a lot of towns and cities, there are going to be community groups. Where I live, there's a community orchestra, there's a community band, and there are some community jazz groups that play. If you've got things like that in your town, figure out how to get involved or at least show up and watch the shows. And of course, there's going to be places where live music is being played. Maybe it's a bar or club, a restaurant or a coffee shop. The point is just to get out and go where music is being played and where people are that you might make music with and start to interact. The next thing I would suggest would be social media, or at least some sort of online presence. We have all come across great musicians online, but rarely are they people in my own area. But when I do run into somebody who's doing something cool in my area, I'm definitely going to see if I can find them online on social media or something and just check them out and do a little homework. So assume that people are going to do that to you too, and have something ready to go. Make sure that your social media is clean and it matches the image that you want to present as you go out and play gigs. And when you do start getting paying gigs, be sure to post positive things about the things that you're playing or the people that you're playing with on your social media. This can let people know that you are positive, that you're a team player, and that you are easy to work with. And honestly, posting positive stuff about the gigs you're playing just makes everybody look good. Okay, now that you've started to establish your own personal network, hopefully you're getting a few paying gigs. But if you're not, and even if you are, consider doing your own thing. Maybe my favorite strategy on this entire list is just to really truly make your own gigs happen. Maybe host an open mic in your living room or a jam session in your backyard. Or if you've got a few friends who you can play with, even if it's just a few songs, do a concert. Go play at a coffee shop or at a restaurant. Or maybe somebody you know is having a Christmas party, a birthday party, some sort of event that you could show up in a low-key way and get some practice in front of a live audience. Whatever it is, just get out there and play. For me, and for a lot of musicians I've talked to, it just took 1 or 2 gigs. And as you go out, especially if you're well prepared, you sound good, you look good, pretty soon you get asked to play again, either with that same group or with another group, and then you're off to the races. Along the way, I want you to follow this piece of advice. It's maybe one of the best things I've ever been told to do. Find 3 or 4 people who are doing what you want to do. They're having legitimate success at it, and offer to take them to lunch. And when you take them to lunch, don't ask for any favors. Don't ask them for a gig or to hire you or anything like that. Just kind of explain what you're doing and ask them, if you were me, what would you be doing? And then just let them talk. Just shut up, listen, and learn. Another question I get asked a lot is, should you ever play for free? Short answer, yes, absolutely. Especially at the beginning. You should be playing as much as you possibly can, whether you're getting paid or not. And once things start to get busy and pick up, then you can decide how much you'll play for, or if you're going to do some things for free. But at the beginning, it is very okay to show up and play without getting paid. This does not mean you should let people take advantage of you. I think you need to judge for yourself the opportunities that you feel like are worth it. But like I say, especially at the beginning, it's not going to be about money. It's going to be about exposure and developing that network and demonstrating that you are somebody who is reliable, a good player, all the good things. Rarely, if ever, are you going to get a call because somebody heard a rumor that you practice drums in your bedroom at home. They got to see you play. So you got to get out and do the thing. Okay, I want to tell just a couple quick stories from my own personal experience, and I'll make it quick, I promise. I just really think these things exemplify some of the qualities that'll help get you hired over and over again. When I was in college, I got hired midway through this recording project. The band leader and the producer had finally just kind of had enough of the drummer. Some things were going on, and I got a call. And I was pretty cocky about it, honestly. I was so stoked because I knew who I was replacing, and there I am in the studio. You know, I've got this guy's gig. And on one of the set breaks, the producer looked at me and he said, "Hey man, you know you're not as good as that other guy, right?" And as my head deflated, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, he's awesome. So why did I get the gig? And he literally looked at me and he said, "Well, you're always on time and you've never shown up drunk." Sometimes being easy to work with and reliable is more important than being the absolute best player in the world. Likewise, I got called in to finish a project for a band that was kind of a new band, and they took their drummer in the studio and they found out he could not play to a metronome, and it was a huge problem. Ended up costing them a lot of money, and I came in as a favor to a friend and finished the album and ended up playing with that band for a long, long time. And I've been told in a variety of situations that our job sometimes is just to sound like a drummer. There's a guy in my local area who's played on literally hundreds of albums, if not 1,000 albums. And one time when I was pretty young, I got hired on a gig with him. I was playing in the percussion section. He was playing the drum kit. And I said, "Man, what's it like to be in the studio and be able to be creative all the time?" And he was like, "No, man, it's not about being creative. It's about sounding like a drummer." And I'm like, "Man, what are you talking about?" And he goes, "Yeah, when I go in, if it's not my album, it's not my project, I'm trying to figure out what that producer wants, I'm trying to figure out what that band leader wants, and then I deliver that to them. I'm providing a service." So sometimes, especially if you're getting hired as an extra musician, what they need is a drummer, and they don't need a bandmate. You're not there to make a creative contribution to the songwriting process. Of course, you want to play creatively and musically and sound great on the track or sound great on the gig, but they need someone to do a job for them. And so your job as the drummer is to have an appropriate groove, have an appropriate fill, have a great sound, and not necessarily stick out unless you're supposed to. And not to put too fine a point on it, I remember when I was studying with a really great drummer and I was starting to develop some serious chops. I played a gig one night, and the guy who hired me afterward, he pulled me aside and he said, "Hey man, I can tell you're working hard. I can tell you're developing." He said, "Just be careful, because the better you get, the fewer people there are that can listen to you and appreciate it." And the message that I got from that was I was playing every chop I knew and every fill I knew on every song. And again, sometimes the job is just to sound like a drummer. And then lastly, for this list, I've been told so many times that, yeah, man, you're a really good drummer, but more importantly, you're a good hang. I'm super appreciative that people enjoy being around me, not just for my playing skills. Occasionally I tell a funny joke, I guess. So I don't think you need to obsess over any of these points, but just be aware that it can be about your playing and it can be about other things as well. And I think it's appropriate when you are being hired, when there's a good time at the right moment, just ask for a little bit of feedback. Just say, "Hey, what is it about my playing or my persona or whatever it is that you like? And what could I do better?" And then be prepared to accept that feedback and just take it as feedback. Don't take it personally. And for whatever it's worth, don't get caught up on trying to be the absolute very best or the first call or the only person in your area who plays gigs. Just focus on getting better all the time. Improve who you are as a player and who you are as a person, and the rest will take care of itself. Here are just a few more things to think about that I've experienced or seen or learned over the years as a gigging drummer. Number one is to be genuine and authentic. I think everybody at some level has a radar or an awareness of when you're being fake or you're not being genuine. So try to show up as the best version of your authentic self every time you can. Also, when you do get a paying gig, try to keep in mind the absolute privilege that it is to play music and get paid for it. I mean, that's awesome. You are not flipping burgers. You're not selling shoes. You're not building homes. You're playing drums and going home with money. Fantastic. I also try to remember, especially when I'm playing a particularly fun gig, that I'd be there playing that music even if I wasn't getting paid because I just enjoy it so much. Another thing to keep in mind is that you want to dress appropriately for the gig. You want to look the part. Every time I get hired for a gig, I will check in and say, hey, what's the dress code? What are we wearing that night? Remember that it's not just about the music. It is a performance in every way. So you want to be matching what else is going on stage and helping to enhance whatever vibe it is that they're trying to create. And if it's your first time working with somebody, remember that that's an audition for future gigs with that artist. You can also consider it an audition for anybody who's there. It might be a manager, it might be stage crew, it might be somebody in the audience. And along those lines, consider the gear that you bring to the gig. We've talked about it a little bit before, but if it's a jazz trio, you're probably not going to bring a 9-piece drum set with 47 cymbals. I mean, maybe, but probably not. Just like with the way you're dressed, your gear, your outfit, your rig needs to look right on stage. Also, make sure that your gear is in working order. You don't want to have a pedal problem or a snare throw-off problem or not have a matching pair of sticks when you're stepping on stage for the gig. Part of being a pro is taking care of your equipment and coming prepared with everything you need. Be respectful and be a professional. Keep your language clean, especially if it's your first time working with an artist and you don't know what the natural boundaries of the conversation are. It's way better to come off as reserved and quiet than be the loose cannon who said something weird. And in terms of playing notes, just be mindful of how loud drums are. And if somebody is just going off during a sound check, then literally nothing else can happen at that moment. You're not having a conversation on the side of the stage while the drummer is doing full-on wipeout for 10 minutes. So for me, especially during sound checks and rehearsals, I try to get away with the minimum possible playing. I do exactly what the sound tech asks me to do. If there's a musical director or a band leader and you're rehearsing something or you're sound checking something, I actually kind of play a game with it myself. And if they cut off the band or motion for us to stop playing, I try to be the first one to go silent and then park my sticks under my arm and don't say a word until they ask us to play again or until they ask for an appropriate response. I want to be the person that's workable and contributing to the situation. And I don't ever want to look like I'm just there for me to play drums. So again, if it's not an appropriate time for me to play, I don't play. And if you do ever have a concern, say something's not going the way that you expected it to, or something feels weird, one rule I try to follow is praise in public. If things are going well, man, it's totally okay for someone to hear you say, man, during sound check, you sounded so great, or man, I love your guitar tone, or wow, you have such a great voice. If there's a concern or a problem, pull somebody aside privately at a time where things are low key and say, hey, I just had a question, or could you help me understand? Or man, my expectation was, and that'll go really, really far. Again, it's about you being a team player and a pro and not causing a scene. You become easy to work with. And again, this one probably goes without saying, but be on time and be reliable. You don't want to be the person who shows up late. There's one gig here in my town that I play where I'm always the first one to show up at the call time. And I'm never going to violate that, even though like the venue isn't even open usually by the time I get there and I'm going to sit around for 5 or 10 minutes. It's okay. I'd way rather be the first one there than the guy who comes in 20 minutes late. I think a lot of this just boils down to paying attention and having a good understanding of what is wanted. You know, somebody hired you. What are they expecting? Find out as much as you can about that expectation and then just meet that expectation with a smile on your face and you'll get another call. And I know I said it earlier, but having a reputation as someone who supports the local music scene will go a long way too. I mean, show your face in your local drum shop or music store, show up at the festivals, go to the concerts, go to the open mics and the jams. People will get to see your face and they'll expect to see you there, and you will quickly develop a network of friends. Not only are these people who could hire you, but even other drummers might call you to sub in on a gig that they can't make. And again, not to overburden the point, but the easier it is to work with you in any situation, the more likely it is that you're going to get a call. Okay, I know I've said a ton in this video and I've repeated a few things that I think are important. And maybe you can think of people who don't follow these rules. Maybe they don't follow any of these rules at all and they still get a ton of gigs. I would just say these people are the exception rather than the rule. Maybe they're a super good player or a super influential person, and so they get called even though they're always late or even though they're a jerk or whatever it is. But don't do that to yourself and don't do that to the people around you. Just follow these rules and you're going to give yourself a much better chance at success. To boil it down, one thing you may have heard is what I call the 2 out of 3 rule. There's 3 things you got to be a successful gigging musician. Number 1, you got to be a really, really good player. Number 2, you've got to be reliable and consistent. And number 3, you got to be a good hang. And if you have any 2 out of those 3, you're probably going to be successful. If you have 3 out of 3, which I strive to be, I think you're going to play as much as you want to play. But I don't know very many people who are 1 out of 3 that are getting consistent gigs. So work on being a reliable human. Be the best musician that you can be, and just be a good person. Be nice. Be easy to work with. All right, there was a lot in this video today. I hope you enjoyed it. If there's anything you think I got wrong or you think that I missed, please drop it in the comments. For those of you that are gigging drummers, I'd also love to hear what experiences you've had. What's the worst gig you ever played, or what's the best gig you ever played? How did you get your first gig, or what was a great learning experience for you? I can't wait to hear some of what you put in these comments. If any of this has been helpful, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you aren't already, and click like. And I will see you in the next one.